Today, we are going to make some grass. No, I'm not in Colorado, so it's not going to be that kind of grass. It's our techniques that are so simple and sensible, your mothers have practically built themselves. Hello folks, it's Mad Dog Merv. Welcome to Adventures in Family History with Mad Dog Merv. Today, well, I am almost finished with this bag of wonderful cinnamon bears, but they're one of my favorite candies, but they're made by this company called Sweets. And some of you know that I have a relative, or have a couple of relatives, that actually worked for the company at one point in time. Now, it's not terribly important in the grand scheme of things, because today what we are going to be doing is we're going to be looking at more photo analysis. We're going to look at it from the perspective particularly of family history, but you can use the skills you learn in photo analysis in doing all sorts of historical research. So stick with Mad Dog Merv as we do some photo analysis and talk a little bit about my grandfather and great-grandfather and their connection to Sweets candy, and some of the really cool ways of analyzing photos to kind of go back in time and see where they lived.
So how this latest adventure started was I had sent a message to my sister, who has all of my grandmother's photo albums, and I was looking for a picture of my uncle, Lael Abbott, who had been in the U.S. military. I don't have a really good picture of him in his uniform. And she says, I think I do. She sent me some scans of her photo album, and there's a lot of pictures. So I found this picture, great. But also, as I'm going through the photo album, I find a picture of my great-grandfather, whose name is John Henry Plant. And he was born in Sheffield, England in January of 1867. He came to America as a baby, and believe it or not, he was delivered by Amazon. Well, his parents, Joseph and Mary, and himself, Henry, came to America on a ship called the SS Amazon. So there, he was delivered by Amazon. And that was in September of 1869. And here he is with his wife, Sarah Marie Swenson, who was born in, I believe, Norway. Now, how they wound up in Swedetown with her being Norwegian, I don't know. But regardless, they had 9 children together. And one of them was my grandfather, Ralph Thomas Plant. So, yay for me. But in looking at this picture, I see the fence and how the fence sits, and I see this tree, and I see what looks like a doghouse or something on the far right-hand side. Not a lot of information in this picture. So, okay, well, great. I've got this picture I hadn't seen of my great-grandfather before. Let's look at other pictures in the photo album. And here is my grandfather, Ralph Plant. Can't really see much of the background, a few homes, obviously the same fence, and obviously the doghouse or dog houses. You can see those in this photo. The baby he's holding, here's the same little girl. Her name is Margaret Green. I'm not sure the relation, but now she's being held by my grandmother, whose first name is Gladys. And you can see behind her there's some mountains starting to come into shape there. Now, they were married in 1917. They had met at the Sweet Candy Company, so that's why I had the bag of candy at the very beginning, because if it wasn't for Sweet Candy Company, who knows? I don't think I'd be here. But she was a candy striper. She would stripe the candy canes, and he was one of the candy makers. He spent his whole career at Sweets and eventually was the head candy maker there. So here's a great picture of him taken, I think, on a different day, but you can plainly see in the background the mountain. And you can see it's the same fence. You can see the trees and whatnot. I know that mountain. And a quick field investigation just a mile and a half north of my house, and I look to the east, and there it is. Right dead center, you can see that hill. That's called Ensign Peak. Very famous peak around here in this valley. So, in looking up 1920 census records, I can see that they lived at 915 North, or excuse me, 915 West, 1400 North. And here's the record. You can see all the family members that lived there at that time. Now, I'm going to go to a Sanborn Fire Insurance map. And sure enough, 14th North, and I look for 915. Holy cow, there it is, right there in this Sanborn Fire Insurance map. So I kind of have an idea of where it's located, how it's situated. It's obviously facing north. Great. Field investigation, here we go. The house is still there to this day, although it's now in kind of an industrial area. Don't know if it's even inhabited by people or if it's just junk all around it, but there it is right there. Hey, that was kind of fun to track down. So let's try a different one. Here is a picture of my grandmother about this same time. She appears to be very pregnant. That would be with my mother. And I'm looking and I'm seeing that this is a different house. Yeah, there's grass, there's a house right next door to it. If you analyze this photo, so the house next door to it, the shadow that is being cast, obviously this house is facing either west or south here in Salt Lake City because of the shadow. So it's either facing south or it's facing west. You'll notice above her the window, the shape of the window. You'll notice how the siding of the house looks. You'll also notice that there's an address placard, although in blowing it up, I can't see the address. But, okay. So this is not that same house. I wonder where they lived. Here's another photo. This was of my grandfather in his Model T. And I can see the license plate there. That's kind of neat. And right above his license plate, that's the same window. And in the background, yes, there is a house back there. Now, in looking at this photo, I can plainly see that window off on the left. From the previous photo, I can see that this is obviously the same house that she was standing in front of and that my grandfather was standing in front of. But wow, kind of a neat looking front porch. So I look at the 1920 census and I find them here on 1600 Hot Springs. But also on that street, there were only two other addresses, and you can see them right there. So now I'm going to go to the U.S. Geological Survey aerial maps. The earliest I could find of that area was 1948, and the Sanborn map does not cover this part of Swedetown. So I'm looking here, and I can see there's a couple of houses kind of off to the left there. There's a main street that's got a whole bunch of houses, and now I can tell you that those are facing east, so obviously those aren't it. But this group of three right here, well, two, and a lot where obviously there used to be a home. So three houses together, and what else do I see in this photo? Well, in yellow is Hot Springs Street. In blue is what's called Hot Springs Road. And in the magenta color is the outline of what's called the Bamberger Railroad. And it was an electric railroad that went from Salt Lake up to an area called Lagoon and then eventually up to Ogden. Now here's a great story about that Bamberger Railroad. My mother, when she was 1 year old, went and sat on the tracks. She had a little red chair. She sat on the tracks that were right across the street from the home. So I know that had to be the home, that blank, area. But at least now we have some pictures from back in the time when my grandparents lived there. Now going to the site and doing an investigation now, there's just It's an industrial area, so there's this storage unit there. Really sad that the house is gone, but at least I can see the area where the tracks were, where my mom sat on the tracks, and where the house was. So here's my grandma and grandpa. This was taken when he was 54 years old, 2 years before his death. Great photo. One last thing we're going to analyze here is this photo of grandma's sister. When she was married, this is right after they were married, and I have no idea where this is, but looking at those mountains, they suspiciously look like some mountains from around here. And then I look closer and I see that there's a lake, and I see there's a building behind the lake. I have a good idea. I know where this is. It's called Lagoon Amusement Park. Here's a picture from the 1920s of the Lagoon Amusement Park. You see the mountains in the background. Oh, no wonder they look so familiar. That picture was taken of them at the Lagoon Amusement Park right after they were married. So again, photo analysis can be very important in discovering things. Discovering where a picture was taken, discovering what armament or loadout was on an aircraft or a ship or something. So anyway, hope you guys got something out of this. Thank you for joining us. We will see you again soon.